She was just a shy maid, cleaning offices in silence, until one simple mistake changed everything. She walked into the wrong CEO's office, alone, nervous, and completely unaware that the millionaire had come back early. What happened next? No one could have predicted. This is not just a story about a mistake. It's a story about love, healing, and a woman who unknowingly changed lives forever. Stay with me, because the ending will warm your heart in a way you'll never forget. Party popper, before we dive into today's powerful story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a single moment of our inspiring, life-changing content. Like and share to spread these beautiful lessons far and wide, because this channel isn't just about storytelling. It's about growth, healing, and the kind of wisdom that touches hearts. Let's grow together. A shy maid accidentally cleaned the wrong CEO's office. Unaware, the millionaire came back early and... It was a quiet Tuesday morning. The city buzzed outside the tall glass building, but inside, silence reigned. The housekeeping staff moved quietly through the 27th floor. Among them was Mira, a soft-spoken, kind-eyed woman in her late 30s. She kept her head low, always careful, always invisible. Her dark hair was tied neatly under a cap. Her uniform smelled faintly of lavender detergent. She worked hard, not just for herself, but for her two little girls who waited for her at home. Life had not been gentle with Mira. Her husband, once a strong carpenter, had suffered an accident and could no longer work. Every morning, she kissed his hands and their daughter's cheeks before rushing to the metro. This job, though simple, meant everything. She never complained. Today, Mira was scheduled to clean office 2703. But the labels were small, and her glasses had cracked a week ago. She squinted at the plaque and entered what she believed was the correct room. The office was larger than the others she had seen. There was a heavy oak desk, polished until it shone. Tall windows opened to the skyline. Bookshelves lined the walls with titles in languages she could not read. Framed photographs of children, two girls, around the same age as hers, smiled from behind the glass. Mira paused. Something about the room felt lived in. Yet she shrugged the feeling off. She had to finish before noon. She began dusting. Her hands moved gently across the shelves, across the photo frames. The scent of lemon oil filled the room. She hummed a lullaby. Then, she heard it. The sharp click of expensive shoes on the tile floor. The door opened. And there he stood. Mr. Reynard Lowell. The CEO. The one no maid had ever met. He was supposed to be overseas until next week. But there he was, tall, commanding, dressed in a long gray coat with raindrops still clinging to the fabric. His eyes were a cold, sea-storm blue. Mira froze. She had no voice. No words. Her heart thumped so loudly, she could hear it in her ears. Mr. Lowell's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward. "Who let you in here?" he asked, his voice low and tired. She bowed her head. Her hands trembled. I am sorry, sir. I thought this was 2703. I will leave right away." She backed toward the door, nearly dropping her cleaning cloth. But something stopped her. Not his anger. Not his authority. It was the way he looked at the photograph she had just polished. His expression changed. The coldness melted. Pain crept into his eyes. Mira, without thinking, said, "She has your smile." The room went silent. He turned to her slowly. His eyes shimmered, just for a second. "You have children?" he asked. She nodded. "Two girls." His lips parted. He walked to his desk, sat down, and stared at the photo of his daughters. "I have not seen them in 3 months," he said. His voice cracked. "They live with their mother in Florence. She thinks I care more about business than birthdays." Mira lowered her eyes. But her heart understood. She knew the ache of separation. The longing. The guilt. The sacrifices. And before she knew it, she said, "Sometimes love means staying, even when it is hard. And sometimes, it means going so they can eat." He looked at her, this woman in a maid's uniform, as if seeing a teacher. Or perhaps, a mirror. The rain tapped gently on the windows. Mr. Lowell stood up. He walked over and took a long breath. Then he said, "I forgot what it means to love without pride." Mira looked up, tears threatening to fall. "Children remember kindness," she said. "They do not need wealth. They need presence." He nodded, slowly, then did something she never expected. He walked to the door and held it open for her. As she stepped out, he said, "What is your name?" "Mira." He smiled. "A beautiful name. Do not clean this office again. Not because you made a mistake, but because I would like to talk more. About children. About love. About what truly matters." And so began a quiet friendship. Not one built on status, but on shared wounds, and the courage to be seen. Mira went home that night and kissed her daughters twice. Her husband held her hand longer. She did not tell them everything. Only that the world had strange ways of reminding us. We are never really invisible. And even a mistake can lead to something unforgettable. This is a real story. One told in whispers by those who believe that kindness is never wasted, and that love, even buried beneath layers of silence and pain, can bloom again, even in the most unexpected places. The next morning, Mira returned to work with her heart still warm. She walked the familiar corridor, mop in hand, passing the same tired lights and humming the same lullaby. But something had changed. Her steps were lighter. Not because her burdens were gone, but because someone had seen them. On the 27th floor, as she passed office 2704, Mr. Lowell's office now burned into her memory. She slowed. The door opened. He was waiting, dressed more casually today. No tie. No storm in his eyes. Just a man, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. He handed one to her. "Chamomile," he said. "I asked around. They said it helps tired hearts." Mira smiled, shyly. She took the cup with both hands. They sat down by the window. No titles. No uniforms. Just 2 parents, 2 souls, strangers no longer. She told him about her daughter's drawings, how they used crayons down to the stub. He listened, not like a boss, but like someone who wanted to understand. In return, he told her about the letters he had written but never sent. How his youngest, Anna, used to braid his tie before work. And how the silence of his penthouse now felt like punishment. Their conversations grew longer each day. Sometimes it was only 5 minutes. Sometimes more. Always sincere. One afternoon, Mira brought in a small notebook. Its pages were filled with stories her daughters had written. Spelling mistakes. Bright colors. Endless hope. Mr. Lowell turned each page with care. "This one," he said, pointing to a crookedly drawn sun. "She sees light even when the sky is gray." Mira nodded. "They always do." He looked at her then, something soft and raw in his eyes. "You are raising warriors." "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am raising healers." One day, Mira found an envelope in her locker. No name. Just her initials. Inside was a simple note. "To the woman who reminded me how to be a father." And beneath it, a photograph. Mr. Lowell, kneeling in a park, his daughters in his arms. Their faces glowed with laughter. Tears welled in Mira's eyes. She pressed the photo to her chest. That evening, she walked home under a sky painted with gold and lavender. The city lights blinked like blessings. She opened the door to their small apartment and lifted her daughters into her arms. Her husband stood at the stove, apron dusted with flour. And for the first time in years, they sat together without rushing. Mira told them a new story. About a man in a tall building. A man who had everything, and yet had forgotten the only thing that mattered. Until someone reminded him. Not with money. Not with advice. But with kindness. Gentleness. Truth. And as her daughters drifted to sleep, Mira whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For the strange accident that was no accident at all. For a door that was not meant to open. And for the reminder that the smallest people, the quietest voices, can sometimes move the heaviest hearts. The story did not end there. Because every day, kindness wrote a new chapter. And love, unpolished, patient, and real, kept turning the page. Weeks passed. The air turned warmer. The trees outside the office began to bloom, tiny green buds shaking in the wind, brave and new. Mira still cleaned the floors, emptied bins, and wiped down desks. But something had shifted deep inside her. She no longer felt invisible. Each morning, Mr. Lowell greeted her with a nod, a kind word, sometimes even a joke. The staff began to notice. The CEO, once cold and distant, now walked slower, smiled more. He spent more time in the break room, listening to stories, not just giving orders. When someone's mother fell ill, he arranged her medical care quietly. When the janitor's son needed school supplies, they arrived at his doorstep anonymously. No announcements. Just small acts of deep understanding. And still, every Wednesday morning, he met with Mira. No longer in his office. Now in the courtyard garden, under the old fig tree. They sat on a bench, sipping tea. He told her about his visit to Florence. How he sat with his daughters and showed them pictures of a maid named Mira. They asked if you were a queen, he said, laughing softly. Mira smiled, her hands folded in her lap. Tell them I clean like one. He laughed again. But there was something deeper in his laugh now. Warmth. Respect. Gratitude. One morning, he brought her a book. The pages were thick, the cover simple, leather-bound with gold edges. Inside were blank pages. What is this? She asked. A place for your daughter's stories, he said. No more loose paper. No more crayons on napkins. Mira turned the book in her hands. It felt heavier than it looked. She ran her fingers along the spine. I never thought their words would matter to anyone but me. They matter to the world, he said. They matter to me. Later that week, Mr. Lowell stood before the company board. He spoke not about profits, but people. He introduced a new program for employees' families. Scholarships. Childcare. Emergency funds. No one expected it. But when asked why, he simply said, because success should never come at the cost of our children's joy. That afternoon, he found Mira again under the fig tree. He sat down beside her. She was reading a story written by her youngest, about a dragon who lost his fire, and a bird who taught him how to fly instead. Your daughter is a poet, he said. She is a mirror, Mira replied. She writes what she sees around her. He looked at her, quiet for a long moment. Mira, would you ever consider helping me build something? She raised an eyebrow, surprised. Build what? A center. 4 single parents. 4 quiet fighters. For children with loud hearts. Somewhere soft, in a world too sharp. Mira's throat tightened. She stared at the fig leaves above them. She thought of all the doors she had once been too afraid to knock on. And all the doors that had opened anyway. I do not know how to build something like that, she whispered. He smiled gently. You already have. The wind blew through the garden. Soft. Tender. Real. And that was how the work began. Not with money. Not with plans. But with one quiet woman who cleaned the wrong office. And one broken father who finally chose to listen. They began meeting more often. Sometimes in the garden. Sometimes in the community library Mira used to visit on weekends. They carried notebooks, ideas, hopes that had long gone unspoken. Mira brought stories, dozens of them. From other maids. From drivers. From parents who juggled night shifts and school drop-offs. Each story was real. Each story mattered. Mr. Lowell brought blueprints. Designs for a center with open windows, classrooms filled with light, and shelves lined with books, not just for reading, but for dreaming. One afternoon, Mira walked through a vacant lot just outside the city. Weeds tangled around broken stones. Trash rustled in the wind. But she stood there, eyes shining. This is it, she said. He looked around. All I see is rubble. She smiled. I see beginnings. Construction started that spring. Mira was there every morning. Hard hat over her scarf. Notebook in hand. She spoke to the workers with kindness and precision. They listened. Because her words carried the weight of truth, not title. Children from the neighborhood would peek through the fences. One day, Mira invited them in. With chalk, She had them draw on the ground what they wanted this place to feel like. Some drew trees. Some drew books. One child drew a giant heart, filling the whole courtyard. Mr. Lowell walked by and stopped. He knelt beside it, gently outlining it with his hand. "This," he said, "will be the center of everything." Word spread. People volunteered, nannies, retired teachers, even office employees who once passed Mira in silence. They painted walls, donated toys, planted flowers. The city council took notice. Newspapers started calling it the Heart Project. But those involved knew the real name. They called it Mira's Light. On the day of the opening, Mira stood in front of the crowd. She wore her best dress. Simple. Blue. Her daughters stood beside her, holding the hands of children they had never met but already loved. Mr. Lowell stepped up to the podium. He spoke softly, like the man who once stood in his office lost and alone. "There are people who change your company," he said. "There are people who change your life. And then there are people who change your soul." He turned to Mira. "This place would not exist without her. She is not just a maid. She is not just a mother. She is a builder. Of people. Of futures. Of hope." The crowd stood. Not in applause, but in deep, reverent silence. A kind of silence reserved for things sacred and true. Later, as the children ran through the halls of the new center, Mira walked out to the garden. The fig tree stood taller now. Its leaves greener. Its roots deeper. Mr. Lowell joined her. She handed him a page from her daughter's notebook. A new story. It was about a man made of stone who thought he had no heart. Until one day, a woman swept into his world and helped him find it. He read it slowly. Tears welled in his eyes, but he did not blink them away. "It is fiction," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No. This one is real." And beside that tree, in the quiet warmth of a late afternoon, they stood together, two people who had nothing in common except everything that mattered. And neither of them noticed the photographer quietly capturing the moment. Because some stories are not meant to be staged. They are meant to be lived. Weeks turned into months. The community center pulsed with life. Every wall echoed with laughter. Tiny feet ran through the halls like the rhythm of hope. Parents came not just to drop off their children, but to stay. To learn. To heal. To belong. Mira began teaching a weekly class, Letters from Home. She showed mothers and fathers how to write stories for their children. Not fairy tales, but real letters. Full of truth. Full of love. One evening, after her class, she found Mr. Lowell in the library. He sat by the window, reading a children's book with his youngest daughter curled beside him. The room glowed orange with the setting sun. Mira stood quietly for a moment, watching. Then she stepped in. He looked up. "She asked me to read the same story 3 times, he said, smiling. "She says the ending gets happier each time." Mira chuckled. "She sounds like her father." He closed the book gently. "I used to think building empires was the most important thing I could do." He looked around at the books, the art on the walls, the children drawing dragons and stars. "I was wrong." Mira sat across from him. "She will remember these nights more than any company name." "I know," he said. And then, softly, he added, "You helped me become someone they can remember kindly." There was a long pause between them. Not uncomfortable. Just full. Full of what had passed. Full of all that had healed. "I used to think I was too broken to be anything more than background," Mira said quietly. He looked at her, eyes steady. "But you were the center of everything." She smiled. "Not the center. Just someone who saw what others looked past." "And that," he said, "is what changes the world." One morning, a letter arrived at Mira's apartment. It was handwritten, the envelope soft with texture. She opened it slowly. Inside was an invitation. The city had chosen Mira's Light for a new award, the Soul of the City Honor. She was to receive it in the Grand Hall, with her daughters by her side. At first, she did not want to go. She was still just a maid in her heart. Still someone who picked up crumbs others left behind. But her husband took her hands, worn and strong, and said, You picked up more than crumbs. You picked up people. So she went. She walked into the grand hall not in heels, but in quiet dignity. She wore the scarf her daughter had sewn with little stars on the edges. Mr. Lowell stood beside her. Not as a CEO, but as a friend. As someone who had been rebuilt, not by wealth, but by warmth. As she stepped up to receive the award, she looked out at the sea of faces. She did not speak long. Only this. Sometimes, you do not need to shout to be heard. You do not need power to make change. You only need to care enough to stay, even when no one sees you. And one day, someone will. The room rose in applause. Not for glamour. Not for perfection. But for truth. Mira stepped down from the stage. Her daughters ran to her, eyes shining. Her husband wrapped his arms around all three of them. Mr. Lowell stood quietly nearby, a smile on his face, tears in his eyes. And though the story was still unfolding, one thing was certain. Kindness had not only cleaned a forgotten office. It had opened a door to a different kind of legacy. One made not of marble or money, but of memory, of presence, of love, immeasurable and unshakable. And that is how a shy maid helped rewrite the story of a millionaire. One gentle page at a time. The days that followed were slow and golden. Children's laughter rang like wind chimes through the wide halls of Mira's light. Parents found courage in one another's stories. And Mira, once quiet, once invisible, became a voice others waited to hear. She no longer walked with lowered eyes. She moved through the building like it was her own heart, room by room, life by life. One afternoon, she was helping a child write their name for the first time. The boy had struggled for weeks, holding his pencil like it was too heavy. But today, he wrote each letter with trembling care. When he finished, he looked up at her, unsure. Mira knelt beside him. She placed her hand over his. "Every name matters," she whispered. He smiled, proud. In the doorway, Mr. Lowell stood watching. He said nothing. But his eyes said everything. Later, he approached her in the hallway. He was holding something behind his back. When he brought it forward, Mira gasped. It was a wooden plaque, carved carefully. It read, "The Mira Room, where every voice is heard." She touched it gently, her fingers tracing the letters. "I do not need my name on a wall," she said, softly. "But your name is already in their hearts," he replied. She looked up at him, a thousand memories between them. "I only ever wanted to be useful," she said. "You became necessary," he answered. The Mira Room became a safe haven. A place for children to draw, to cry, to be loud without shame. A place where mothers who barely spoke the language could tell their stories through laughter and tears. Fathers who had fallen behind could start again with patient hands guiding them. One evening, as the sun fell low and golden light spilled across the floors, Mira sat with her daughters on a soft rug in that room. They were painting a mural on the back wall, stars and hearts and hands holding each other. She felt her youngest rest her head against her shoulder. "Mama," the child whispered, "are you happy now?" Mira looked out the window. The fig tree swayed gently. Somewhere, she could hear Mr. Lowell reading to a group of children. Her husband would be home soon, dinner warm on the stove. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathed in the scent of paint and books and home. "I am not just happy," she said. "I am whole." Outside, a mother sat on the bench near the gate, rocking a sleeping child. A teenage boy helped a girl tie her shoes with patience unusual for his age. Inside, a young assistant watched Mira from afar, notebook in hand, learning not just what to do, but how to be. And quietly, without fanfare, the world shifted again. Because sometimes the loudest change is made in the softest places. And those who were once overlooked become the very foundation others stand upon. The story continued, not on grand stages, but in morning greetings, in tiny acts of patience, in eyes that finally saw. And Mira, gentle, steady Mira, kept walking forward. Not because she had to, but because she believed every step could make the ground safer for someone else. And in her shadow walked many, each carrying their own quiet strength, each whispering the same truth with every kind thing they did. Love does not need permission to begin. It only needs someone to stay. Years passed like turning pages in a quiet book. The city changed. Buildings grew taller. Cars grew faster. People rushed more. But inside the gates of Mira's light, time moved differently. There, kindness still took its time. It lingered in the sound of small hands clapping after spelling a new word. It echoed in the shared meals, the warm hugs, the gentle corrections. And Mira, now with silver strands in her hair and a glow in her eyes, remained its heart. She no longer cleaned offices. She cleaned wounds. Invisible ones. With her voice. With her presence. With her listening. Mr. Lowell eventually stepped down from his company. But he never stepped away from the center. He visited often, still reading to children. Still sitting beside Mira on the garden bench. Their friendship had grown like the fig tree above them, rooted in pain, strengthened by love, reaching ever upward. One evening, during the annual celebration of Mira's light, her eldest daughter stood at the podium. She was now a teacher, a writer, a builder of dreams like her mother. She spoke with a quiet strength, tears glistening in her eyes. "My mother," she said, "never asked for praise. She never asked for reward. She simply gave, day after day, until what she gave became something no one could live without." The audience stood in silence again. The kind reserved not for applause, but for reverence. Mira watched from the side, holding her husband's hand. She did not cry. She smiled. Because her daughter had become more than she ever dared hope. She had become kind. The following morning, Mira returned to the garden bench. The fig tree was taller than the roof now, casting shade like a sheltering hand. Mr. Lowell joined her, 2 cups of tea in his hands. Just like the first day. They sat quietly, watching the children play. After a long silence, he turned to her and said, "If this were a story, where would you say the ending is?" She looked at the children. At the fig tree. At the murals, the families, the healed hearts. Then she shook her head with a smile. "There is no ending," she said. "There is only the lesson." "And what is the lesson?" he asked. She looked at him. Gentle. Wise. Certain. That love does not need wealth to be powerful. That the smallest act of care can unlock someone's entire future. And that when we see the invisible, lift the weary, and stay when others leave. We build more than buildings. We build people. And people build the world. The sun dipped low behind them. A golden light touched the garden. And so, the story came to rest. Not with an end, but with a truth. No voice is too small. No kindness is wasted. And sometimes, the shyest heart holds the strongest light. ***.